Hi there, welcome back to Haunting Veils. Tonight, we follow Poirot into a case that begins not with a weapon, but with a glove. A delicate silk glove, once pure, now marred by a dark, unsettling stain. What seems like a trivial detail soon unravels into a puzzle of hidden truths, secret rendezvous, and a crime stitched together in silence. To Poirot, every mark is a clue, and this stain may be the key to unlocking the entire mystery. This is the stain on the silk glove, a Hercule Poirot mystery. And before we lift the final veil, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because more chilling mysteries await, only here on Haunting Veils. Chapter 1. The Uneasy Arrival. The rain fell steadily over London, the kind of relentless drizzle that blurred the outlines of street lamps and sent passers by hurrying under umbrellas. The city was restless that evening, shadows stretching long across pavements, whispers rising in alleys where the fog clung low. Through this curtain of gray, a motor car drew to a halt before a townhouse of sober brick, tall windows, and iron railings polished to a dull gleam. The driver, buttoned tight against the weather, sprang out and opened the rear door. And there, stepping lightly onto the glistening pavement, came Hercule Poirot. His bowler hat sat at the perfect angle. His mustaches gleamed despite the drizzle, and not a single hair of his immaculate appearance had yielded to the damp. He adjusted his scarf with a deft tug, as if to remind the world that order and symmetry could exist even in chaos. Poirot paused, gazing up at the house before him. The curtains were drawn, the upper windows dark. Only the glow of a single lamp burned faintly behind lace on the ground floor. A house in mourning, or perhaps a house in fear. He muttered softly, in that accented voice which carried both gentleness and precision. Eh bien, always it is the quiet houses that conceal the loudest tragedies. The butler awaited him at the door. Tall, stiff, his complexion pale from years of service rather than youth. He bowed with professional gravity and ushered the detective inside. Poirot's eyes swept the hallway. The polished floor, the gleam of brass, the portraits stern upon the walls. Everything was neat, everything in place. Yet the air was heavy, as though the house itself held its breath. Up the grand staircase, along a corridor muffled with carpet, to a drawing room dimly lit. And there stood Inspector Jameson of Scotland Yard, his frame square, his eyes lined with fatigue. He rose quickly from the chair by the hearth. "Poirot," Jameson said, relief cutting through his formality. "I was half afraid you would refuse. But thank heaven you've come." Poirot removed his gloves one by one, but as he drew the left glove from his hand, his gaze lingered upon it. A pale silk glove, but across the fingertips ran the faintest streak of rusty brown. A stain too small to demand notice, yet far too telling for Poirot to ignore. His mustaches twitched almost imperceptibly. He folded the gloves together and slipped them into his pocket with an air of deliberation. "My dear Jameson," he said quietly, "when Scotland Yard calls upon Hercule Poirot, it is never for the trifles. What misfortune has darkened this house?" The inspector's mouth tightened. He gestured toward the far end of the room. There, upon a chaise lounge, a figure lay motionless beneath a sheet. The stillness was absolute. The faint shape of a woman's form rested beneath the linen, and the shadow it cast against the curtains was enough to chill the marrow. "Lady Winifred March," Jameson said heavily. "She was found scarcely 2 hours ago. The doctor is certain poison. A swift, merciless dose." Poirot moved forward. He approached as though the silence itself might break under careless steps. Slowly he bent, and with reverent fingers drew down the sheet. The woman's face was frozen in its final moment. Lady Winifred had once possessed beauty, a proud forehead, delicate cheekbones, but now her lips were tinged with blue, her eyes closed as if the darkness had claimed her swiftly. In her right hand, clasped with the grip of death, was a white silk glove. The glove bore a mark, faint, rusty, and strangely familiar. Poirot lowered the sheet once more. His voice was nearly a whisper. Mon Dieu, it begins. The minutes stretched into hours as Poirot examined the scene. His mind ticked silently, taking in the smallest details. On the sideboard, a crystal glass, overturned, a faint trace of liquid drying at its rim. On the carpet near the window, the faint outline of a shoe, not belonging to the butler nor the inspector. In the air, a note of perfume. Violets, subtle, lingering, entirely out of place. Jameson watched him with the nervous patience of a man who knows Poirot will speak only when the pattern is complete in his mind. At last, Poirot broke the silence. There are echoes here, Inspector, echoes of the old cases. Poison, as with the murder of Roger Ackroyd. The deception of appearances, like murder on the Orient Express. The faint perfume, how it recalls death on the Nile. But do not be misled. These echoes are but distractions. This case, it is singular. It will not be solved by remembering the past, but by seeing what lies directly before the eyes. Jameson frowned. You think the stain? Patience, mon ami. Poirot lifted a finger. The stain will speak. But for now, we must gather the family. For where there is death, there is also inheritance. An inheritance is the oldest motive in the world. They came reluctantly. The family March. Sir Henry March, the widower, tall and lean, his hair silver, his expression locked between grief and calculation. His eyes were red, yet his hands did not tremble as he poured a brandy before sitting by the fire. Clara March, the daughter, pale, anxious, her youth shadowed by worry. She clutched a lace handkerchief that bore tiny tears where her fingers had twisted it. Her eyes flicked from Poirot to her father, then to her brother, as though searching for reassurance she would not find. And Geoffrey March, the son, restless, brusque, his tone harsh when he spoke. His clothes were fine, yet his shoes bore dust upon the sole, as though he had traveled in haste. His eyes avoided his father's gaze. They spoke, each in their turn, but their words were fragments, broken pieces of grief. She was in good spirits yesterday, Clara murmured. She had been unwell for months, Geoffrey insisted. It was sudden, Sir Henry said flatly. Yet beneath each statement lay a tremor. Poirot, seated with hands neatly folded, listened to the tremor rather than the words. He heard guilt in Clara's hesitation, anger in Geoffrey's defiance, and in Sir Henry something harder to define. Not grief, not even shock, something that glittered beneath the surface, sharp and dangerous. At last, Poirot leaned forward. His voice, gentle as silk, cut through the hush. There is among you, yes, Amos, one who knows more than they confess. One who touched the glove of Lady March before her final breath. One whose heart is troubled, though the lips are silent. The stain upon the silk, it is no accident. The words fell into the silence like stones into a pond. The family shifted uneasily. Clara lowered her eyes. Geoffrey muttered something under his breath. Sir Henry's grip upon his glass grew tighter. Poirot rose. His silhouette was small against the tall windows, yet his presence filled the room. This death, he said softly, is no ordinary tragedy. It is a puzzle, a design most intricate. But understand me well. The truth, it will come, and when it comes, it will tear aside the silk curtain of gentility to reveal the stain of betrayal beneath. At that moment, thunder cracked outside, shaking the panes. Somewhere in the house, a clock struck midnight, solemn and deep, and Hercule Poirot allowed the faintest smile to curl beneath his mustaches. The game had begun. Chapter 2. The Footsteps at Midnight. The storm did not relent. Through the long night, it rattled the panes, pressed damp fingers of fog into the cracks of the old March townhouse, and turned the lamps in the street outside into dim, shivering stars. Inside, the household stirred uneasily. Servants moved with hushed voices, trays of tea untouched, eyes flickering toward the drawing room where Lady Winifred lay. Poirot, however, did not rest. He spent the early hours walking slowly from chamber to chamber, each step measured, each glance precise. He carried no notebook, for Hercule Poirot trusted the little gray cells far more than ink and paper. Every overturned glass, every misplaced object, every footstep in the dust of the corridor, all were recorded with perfect clarity in his mind. It was upon the staircase, broad, sweeping, carpeted in crimson, that he paused longest. The banister gleamed under the faint light of the sconces. The air here was colder, and there was something uneasy. Poirot knelt, fingertips brushing the edge of the carpet. There was faint but certain. A mark, not the stain of mud nor spilled wine, but something subtler. A smear, reddish-brown, where no such mark ought to be. His eyes narrowed. "Encore the same," he whispered. "Always the stain returns." By morning, the household was brittle with fatigue. The family gathered in the breakfast room, each one bearing the pallor of sleepless hours. Clara's eyes were rimmed with red. Geoffrey smoked a cigarette furiously, pacing near the window. Sir Henry sat rigid at the head of the table, his untouched plate before him, staring as if beyond the walls themselves. Poirot entered quietly, his presence like a sudden shift in the air. The family looked up, some with relief, others with unease. "Bon matin, mes amis," Poirot greeted softly. "Forgive me that I intrude, but already the day has brought questions. It is best we address them." Sir Henry's jaw tightened. "Questions, Monsieur Poirot? What further indignities must this house endure?" Poirot inclined his head, his tone courteous. "Only those indignities that lead us to truth, Sir Henry. Consider, Lady March's death was sudden, yes, but not without design. I have already observed much that troubles me." Clara's fingers twisted her handkerchief tighter. "You mean you do not think it was natural?" Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. "Mademoiselle, your mother did not pass from illness. It was poison. That the doctor confirms. And poison, it does not fall from the sky. It comes by a hand, by intention." The silence that followed was taut, trembling. Geoffrey crushed his cigarette into the tray with unnecessary force. "You speak as though it must be one of us," he muttered. "But others come and go. Servants, visitors. Anyone could have." Poirot lifted a hand. "Ah, but the servants, they live in the shadow of discipline. They are watched, their comings and goings noted. No, no, the hand that gives poison, it is always close, always trusted." His gaze swept across them, resting briefly upon each face. Clara flinched. Geoffrey scowled. Sir Henry's expression remained unreadable. Poirot allowed the silence to stretch before he continued. "In my mind," he said softly, "I hear again the footsteps upon the staircase. Heavy, uncertain, in the hour before midnight. The butler heard them. I saw the mark upon the carpet. And I tell you, those footsteps were not of a servant. They were too bold. They belonged to one who believed himself safe in this house." Later that morning, Inspector Jameson returned with fresh reports. He carried with him the unease of a man who knows the case is slipping beyond his grasp. "There's little doubt now," he told Poirot in private. "The glass by the sideboard contained digitalis. Enough to kill quickly. No trace of a bottle yet. Someone's removed it. We've searched the study, her room, even the cellar." Poirot nodded gravely. "It is always so. The poison hides itself as though ashamed." but will be found, if not in the bottle, then in the actions of the guilty. Jameson rubbed his forehead. The family, do you suspect them all? Poirot smiled faintly. I suspect no one. I observe everyone. To suspect too soon, it is the error of the impatient detective. Non, we wait. We listen. Already, the voices of this house tell their tale. Jameson frowned. And what tale do they tell? Poirot's eyes glittered. That of inheritance, mon ami. Of debts unpaid. Of a daughter who fears disgrace, a son who drowns in obligation, and a husband who hides more than sorrow. It is an old tale, as old as the ABC murders, where each death disguised the true target. As old as murder in Mesopotamia, where love itself became betrayal. Yes, the tale is old, but the ending? Ah, that we do not yet know. The day wore on. Guests began to arrive, friends of the March family, dignitaries, neighbors. They came to offer condolences, but in truth, many came to watch. In drawing rooms such as these, death was never merely personal. It was society's spectacle. Poirot moved among them quietly, exchanging pleasantries, observing the glances, the whispers, the sudden silences when certain names were spoken. He noted the young man who greeted Clara with too much familiarity, the lady who avoided Sir Henry's gaze, the friend of Geoffrey's whose face darkened at the mention of debts. Every gesture, every hesitation, Poirot stored within his mind. At last, as the evening gathered and the lamps were lit, he returned once more to the staircase. There, in the shadowed corner where the banister met the landing, he stood very still. He closed his eyes. He listened. The murmur of voices drifted upward, the crackle of the fire below, the faint tapping of rain against the window panes. But beneath it all, he heard again in memory the sound that had awakened the butler the night before. The creak of a step, the weight of a foot dragging slightly, as though burdened. Poirot's eyes opened. He crouched once more, tracing the faint smear upon the carpet. The same stain as on a glove. The same mark upon his own. Softly, almost reverently, he whispered, "The staircase, it keeps the secret. It saw who passed in the night. And one day, soon it will speak." Midnight came again, and the storm still raged. But now the house was not merely silent. It was watchful. The walls seemed to listen. The very air seemed to hold its breath. And Poirot, seated alone in the dim light of his chamber, folded his hands before him and let his thoughts spin their web. The stain, the glove, the footsteps, inheritance, pride, betrayal. He closed his eyes, the mustaches quivering ever so slightly as the little gray cells whirred in perfect rhythm. Somewhere within the March house, a murderer slept, but not forever. Not while Hercule Poirot kept vigil in the shadows of the staircase. Chapter 3. The Whisper of Betrayal. The March household did not sleep easily. Though the storm outside had eased into a steady drizzle, inside the walls of the townhouse shadows lingered longer than they ought to, and every creak of timber seemed to echo with suspicion. Poirot, who had risen before dawn, took his breakfast quietly. A boiled egg, precise, and toast cut neatly into squares. Symmetry even in grief. He glanced at Inspector Jameson, whose coffee lay forgotten, his thoughts consumed by the case. "You look troubled, mon ami," Poirot murmured, dabbing his lips with a napkin. "You have dreamed of shadows?" Jameson gave a dry laugh. "Not dreamed. I hardly slept. This family, they're like a nest of hornets. Touch one, and the rest stir. But none sting openly. That's what troubles me. They're all too careful." Poirot's mustaches twitched. Too careful, yes, or too practiced. It is the same. When grief is honest, it is untidy. It is loud. But here, he gestured delicately to the quiet breakfast table, the neatly folded napkins, the untouched plates. Here grief is silent. Silent grief is dangerous, my friend. Later that morning, Poirot asked to speak with Clara March alone. The young woman entered the library timidly, her lace handkerchief clutched like a lifeline. The shelves of books towered above them, the smell of old leather and dust thick in the air. "Sit, mademoiselle," Poirot said gently. "Do not be afraid. You're safe here." Her eyes brimmed. I don't know what you mean, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze sharp yet kind. "You fear me, Clara, but you fear someone else more. You see, I know of the debts, the whispers in society, the gossip in the tea rooms. Your brother, he borrows recklessly. Your father, he hides much. And you, mademoiselle, you hide something also." Clara's lips trembled. She shook her head. "No." Poirot raised a hand. "It is not a crime to love, but it is dangerous when love becomes entangled with lies." Her eyes widened. Her handkerchief fell to her lap. For a heartbeat, she was utterly still, and then, softly, she whispered, "You mean Anthony?" Poirot nodded once. "The young man who came yesterday. Too familiar with you for a casual friend. He bears the look of one who would risk all for you. And you, Clara, you would risk much for him. Even, perhaps, silence when truth is demanded." Tears welled, and she pressed her face into her hands. "I never wanted any of this. He was only trying to help me. But my mother," she disapproved. "She said Anthony was beneath us. She said I would ruin myself if I married him. But she didn't know him." "She didn't know?" Clara stopped abruptly, biting her lip as though she had said too much. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "So there was conflict, passion, the kind of words spoken that cut deeply. And now she is dead. Does it not trouble you, Clara, that suspicion may fall upon the man you love?" Her hands dropped. She stared at him, pale as porcelain. "You cannot think, Anthony." "I think nothing yet," Poirot said softly. "But I listen, and the whispers, they tell me betrayal hides close." By midday, Geoffrey March sought Poirot out himself. He entered the study with the restless energy of a man cornered by invisible foes. "You've been speaking with Clara, haven't you?" Geoffrey demanded. "She's fragile, Poirot. She'll say anything when pressed. But you mustn't believe her. You mustn't." Poirot regarded him calmly. "Mon cher, it is not belief I seek. It is truth. If your sister says much, it is because she feels much. And what of you, Geoffrey? What do you feel?" The young man flushed. "What do I feel? I feel like I'm being hunted in my own home. Yes, I had debts. What man of my age doesn't? But to suggest, to even hint, that I would poison my own mother for money." His voice broke into a harsh laugh, but the laugh was brittle, strained. Poirot said nothing, merely studied him. Geoffrey shifted under the gaze, as though it pierced deeper than words. "You don't understand," Geoffrey muttered at last. "She would never have let me go under. She'd have helped, somehow. She always did. Why would I kill the only person who still cared for me?" Poirot's head tilted slightly. "Always did she help you?" Geoffrey faltered. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched. Then, abruptly, he turned away. "Believe what you like, Poirot, but you'll find you're wrong." He strode out, slamming the door behind him. Poirot exhaled softly. His mustaches twitched. Such anger, such defensiveness. Always it hides something. That evening, Poirot dined with Inspector Jameson in the small guest dining room. The storm had passed, leaving the city damp and chilled. A fire crackled, casting long shadows against the paneling. Jameson leaned close. "I don't like it, Poirot. The son's temper, the daughter's secret lover, the father's coldness. Any one of them could have done it, but we've no proof. And the glove, it's too convenient. Anyone could have stained it." Poirot tapped a finger against his glass. "Ah, but that is where you are wrong. Anyone could have stained it, yes, but only one would. You see, Jameson, a glove, it is intimate. To place something in the hand of Lady March as she died, that was not chance. That was deliberate. That was personal." Jameson frowned. "You think the stain is the key?" Poirot smiled faintly. Always, my friend, the key is the thing most visible. In Murder on the Orient Express, it was the multiplicity of clues. In Peril at In-House, it was the detail overlooked. Here it is the glove. Too brazen to ignore, too strange to dismiss. The glove whispers a betrayal. Later, when the house had gone quiet, Poirot walked once more through the darkened hall. The grandfather clock ticked solemnly. The staircase loomed above, its shadows deep. He paused, his hand upon the banister, and listened. And then he heard it, a whisper, faint, fleeting, carried on the hush of the night. A woman's voice, low, desperate, sorrowful. It was not Clara. It was not a servant. It was a memory, perhaps, or an echo of the house itself. But to Poirot it was enough. He closed his eyes, the little gray cells alight with certainty. The house remembers, he murmured. It remembers the betrayal. And soon, so shall we. Chapter 4. The Footprint Revealed. The morning after was raw with damp air. Mist clung to the March residence, wrapping the tall windows in pale veils, as though the house itself wished to hide from scrutiny. Hercule Poirot did not permit such concealment. His little gray cells had been restless all night, circling around a single idea, the glove, the stain, and the betrayal it symbolized. At breakfast, he refused toast. He refused eggs. He even refused his usual symmetry. Instead, he stared into his coffee, silent. Jameson watched him warily. "You're quieter than usual," the inspector muttered. Poirot's eyes lifted. They gleamed. "Because, mon ami, I am listening. Not to words, but to footsteps. Always there are footsteps in such cases. Some hurry, some linger. Some are too careful. Too careful is dangerous." Later that morning, Poirot requested that all members of the March household gather in the drawing room. The room was heavy with gilt frames, velvet curtains, and the stale perfume of a life abruptly ended. Clara sat pale, her hands folded tightly. Geoffrey leaned against the mantelpiece, his face drawn, his eyes restless. Harold March, stiff and proper, stood with arms behind his back, unyielding as stone. Poirot took his place before them. He held no notes, no cane, no spectacles, only his immaculate poise. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "forgive me. I intrude upon your grief. Yet grief often conceals truth, and truth, like murder, will not stay buried. I must ask questions." Geoffrey groaned. "More questions? Haven't we endured enough?" "Endured," Poirot repeated softly. "An interesting word. Endured what exactly? The loss of your mother? Or the scrutiny it brings?" Geoffrey flushed scarlet, but said nothing. Poirot let the silence linger, then turned to Harold. "Tell me, monsieur, where were you at 11 o'clock, the night your wife died?" Harold's lips thinned. "In my study. I told your inspector as much. I was reading." Poirot nodded. "Yes, reading. And yet, when I examined your study, I found no lamp oil burned low, no cigar ash, no sign of your presence beyond the hour of 9. You read, yes, but only until then." Harold stiffened. "Are you calling me a liar, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot's mustaches twitched. "Not a liar, merely economical with the truth." Clara gave a small gasp. Geoffrey swore under his breath. Harold's glare could have split stone. When the questioning ended, Poirot excused himself. He did not linger in the drawing room, nor retire to his chamber. Instead, he slipped quietly into the hallway, to the grand staircase that wound upward like a spine through the house. The carpet was thick, the banister polished. Yet Poirot knelt, carefully, his nose almost brushing the fibers. His fingers traced faint indentations, barely visible. Jameson arrived behind him. "What are you doing down there?" Poirot raised a finger for silence. Then, delicately, he drew from his pocket a small magnifying lens. He peered close. The faint depressions in the carpet revealed themselves under scrutiny. Impressions left not by a heavy boot, but by something lighter, slender, feminine. A footprint, Poirot whispered. Not large. And see here, at the edge, a trace of mud. The rain fell that night. Someone entered, climbed the stairs, and lingered. Jameson crouched. But the servants said no one left or entered after 10. Poirot smiled faintly. Servants see much, but not all. Always, there is the possibility of a silent visitor, or a family member who returned unseen. He plucked at a fiber. The mud was faintly red, iron-rich, unlike the gray London soil outside. Jameson frowned. That's not from the street. No, Poirot agreed. It is from somewhere else entirely. Somewhere only one of them has been. That afternoon, Poirot requested permission to examine Lady March's belongings once more. In her boudoir, draped in mourning shrouds of black fabric, he searched delicately. Drawers, vanity, jewelry boxes. And then, in the lowest drawer, beneath silk scarves and letters tied with ribbon, he found it. A second glove, perfectly white, perfectly clean. He held it delicately between thumb and forefinger. Ah, he murmured, the partner of the stained one. Pristine, untouched, and yet not quite. For at the edge of the cuff, so faint it could be overlooked, was a smudge of red earth. The same iron-rich trace found upon the stair. Poirot replaced the glove, his eyes narrowing. Now it begins to speak. Now the stain is no accident, but a message. One glove with a stain placed upon the body, the other hidden. Together, they tell a story of betrayal. That evening, Poirot called once more upon Clara. He found her in the conservatory, the scent of damp roses heavy in the air. She startled at his arrival. Monsieur Poirot, she whispered. Have you found? Poirot raised a hand. I have found what you fear, mademoiselle. A footprint, a glove, a stain. These things point not to strangers, but to this house, to someone close. Her face drained of color. No, it cannot be. Clara, Poirot said softly. You know something more? You tremble not at grief, but at guilt. Not your own, perhaps, but another's. Tell me, child. Betrayal. It whispers, does it not? Who betrayed whom? Tears welled in her eyes. She shook her head violently. I cannot. You do not understand. If I speak, it will ruin us all. Poirot's gaze was steady, unwavering. Better to ruin with truth than to rot in silence. But she fled, her sobs echoing in the conservatory. Poirot let her go. He did not chase. His mustaches twitched. She knows. But love makes cowards of us all. That night, Poirot paced his room, the case burning in his thoughts. He recalled the words of Christie's own tales, the betrayal hidden in Sad Cypress, the poison cup and 5 little pigs, the careful deceit in cards on the table. Each crime bore the mark of human weakness. Pride, greed, love, betrayal. And here, in the March household, the same pattern played itself once more. The glove, the stain, the footprint. Someone had entered Lady March's room not out of chance, but with purpose. Someone had placed that glove deliberately. Someone who wished to mark the scene, not conceal it. Poirot stopped at the window. Outside, the mist was lifting. A thin moon broke through. He smiled faintly. Tomorrow, he whispered, we shall reveal the footprint, and with it, the betrayer. Chapter 5. The Betrayer Unmasked. The March household gathered once more in the drawing room, its air thick with dread. Outside, the mist had gone, leaving a pale sky, cold and different. Inside, however, the atmosphere bristled with suspicion. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, his posture immaculate, his eyes glittering. At his side, Inspector Jameson carried a notebook, though his pen hovered idly. He knew the moment of revelation was near, and no ink could capture the drama Poirot was about to unfold. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began softly. "We have walked together through grief, through confusion, through whispers of betrayal. Now the truth demands its place. And the truth, I assure you, cannot be denied." He paused, letting the silence press upon the room. Clara's hands twisted in her lap. Geoffrey scowled at the rug. Harold stared ahead, rigid. Poirot paced slowly. At first, the crime appeared simple. Lady March poisoned, a stained glove upon her hand. Suspicion scattered like broken glass. Sharp, dangerous, but unfocused. Yet, as always, the little gray cells bring order to chaos. He turned sharply, his gaze falling upon Geoffrey. "You, mon cher, had debts. Great ones. Motive, yes. But your anger betrayed only fear, not guilt." Geoffrey shifted, opening his mouth, but Poirot raised a hand. "And you, Clara, you concealed your love for Anthony. You feared exposure, feared your mother's disapproval. Motive, yes, but your tears spoke of loss, not a murder." Clara bowed her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. Poirot turned at last to Harold March. His mustaches twitched. "And you, monsieur, you claimed to be in your study. Yet the evidence contradicted you. No lamp oil burned. No ash fell. You were elsewhere. You climbed the stairs." Harold's face remained a mask. "Preposterous." "Huh? Mais non. For the carpet spoke where you would not. A footprint, slender, deliberate. Not Clara's. Not a servant's. Yours. The print bore traces of red earth. And in your wife's glove, hidden away, the same red earth clung. You were in her chamber. You placed the stained glove upon her as she died. Why? Because you wished the blame to fall elsewhere. On Geoffrey. On Clara. On anyone but yourself." The silence shattered. Geoffrey surged forward, fists clenched. "You mean my father?" Clara gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Harold's composure cracked. His jaw tightened. His eyes flickered, but still he did not speak. Poirot's voice cut through the tumult. "Lady March discovered something, did she not? Perhaps your dealings. Perhaps your indiscretions. She threatened exposure. And you, a man of pride, of reputation, could not allow it. You gave her poison. And then, in a gesture cruel and symbolic, you stained her glove, so that betrayal itself would be her shroud." Harold finally spoke, his voice low, trembling with rage. "You arrogant little man. You think you know everything." Poirot bowed his head slightly. "Not everything, monsieur. Only the truth." Jameson stepped forward, steel in his tone. "Harold March, you are under arrest for the murder of your wife, Lady Eleanor March." The house erupted. Clara wept openly, torn between horror and relief. Geoffrey raged, his fury directed at his father, his voice echoing through the chamber. Servants whispered at the door, wide-eyed. Through it all, Poirot remained still, calm, his gaze distant. When at last the room quieted, Clara approached him. Her voice shook. "Monsieur Poirot, how did you know? How did you truly know?" Poirot looked upon her with gentle gravity. "Because, mademoiselle, betrayal always leaves a mark. The stain on the glove was no accident. It was a message. A man does not leave such symbols unless he wishes the world to see them. Your father thought himself clever, but the glove spoke more eloquently than he." Clara's tears fell anew. "And now, what will become of us?" Poirot sighed softly. "Life will continue, child. Broken, yes. But even from betrayal, truth can heal. If you allow it." That night, alone in his chamber, Poirot reflected. Another crime solved. Another household torn apart by secrets. He thought of Christie's tales, of the hollow where love betrayed itself, of Sad Cypress, where jealousy poisoned the heart. Always, human weakness repeated its patterns. Always, betrayal whispered in silk and shadow. Poirot smoothed his mustaches, his eyes heavy with weariness. "It is finished," he murmured. "And yet, toujours, the world brings another case, another stain, another glove. And so, dear listener, the mystery of the stain on the silk glove draws to its close. The betrayer unmasked, the truth revealed, the house of March left in ruins of its own making. But mysteries, they never truly end, do they? For in the pages of Agatha Christie's world, in the sharp brilliance of Hercule Poirot's mind, there is always another shadow, another whisper, another secret waiting to be uncovered. If you were captivated by this tale, don't let the trail grow cold. Subscribe now, join us again, and step once more into the world of mystery, murder, and the genius of Hercule Poirot. Because every glove leaves a stain, and every stain tells a story.